next speaker is Tevis. Greg is a principal at Deloitte Strategy and Operations Practice. He focuses on corporate and competitive strategy within technology, media, and telecom group. He advises executive teams on identification and execution of organic and inorganic growth opportunities and strategy. So this is very much a daily job for him when he's going to shed some light on what he advises those executives on. Mergers and acquisitions, finance transformation, so a really broad scope of things he focuses on. Prior to Deloitte, he, I don't know if this was a more complicated role, but I'm sure there were days that when it was, he was a telecom network engineer designing and selling data network solutions to Fortune 100 companies. He has a double major, as though double E was not fun enough. He also majored in biomedical engineering, and he has an MBA with a specialization in strategy. Greg, please come.
Thanks for having me. So what I do, and you heard in the introduction, is advise executive teams on topics of interest around growth and growth strategy. So what I thought I'd do is kind of cover two areas that have been really hot lately, and actually both fueled by Connected Planet and a number of the topics that were already covered. One of those is big data. So what's the big deal with big data? We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about alternative monetization. In the context of advertising-enabled models, talk about are they here to stay, and if so, how are they going to balance across the ecosystem going forward for products and services. Okay, so it wouldn't be like a consulting slides if I didn't try and jam a lot on there. So, there's so much insight that I don't want you to listen to me, just read it. But really kind of three areas of big data just to set the context, right? And then one set of applications. One is data, and the data is what it is that we're kind of working with around the new structured, unstructured data. This is what's fueling a lot of the decisions going forward. The second is a technology aspect of it. And so this is both in the infrastructure to be able to support it, as well as the data management in this new world. And our friends at IBM are very solid in the infrastructure, data management, and moving up the stage to the next area, which is analytics. So what we're finding, and what you guys are probably finding as well, is that without a solid analytics platform to enable decision-making from a software standpoint and a services standpoint, big data is just that. Lots of data sitting out there, being collected, being stored, and unable to be manipulated and have decisions made on. And then the last piece is we kind of look at this is consumer and business applications. And what you see a lot of smaller companies, especially in the wireless space and others, working on end-to-end solutions, trying to find the data, capture that data, store it in ways that are new and different than have been in the past, like cloud-based solutions from companies like Amazon, AT&T, and others, and layering on an analytics platform in order to make these decisions. And so really you can play, as you start to think about this big data space, in any one of those three areas, or in a complete solution as you're delivering value to clients. So you start to begin to think about where in big data do I want to focus, and what are the implications for what it is that you do. Those are kind of the three lenses plus the finish lens that I was going to talk about. And so how big are these going to be? And all this is in a North American lens, obviously much bigger globally. But as you look at it, at least my prediction is data doesn't really get much more valuable in a material step function way than it has before in the past. I think there's a tremendous amount of data that already exists in the world. There are rates for that data that exist in the world, and in its current context, it probably shifts value, but I'm not sure the consumer or businesses have a tremendous amount of more money to spend on the fundamental data itself. As you start to look at where you start to get more value layered onto, you start to think about the technology and the ability to not only utilize the structured portion of data, which is relatively solid and formed today, but still has opportunities to grow, but the unstructured portion of data, and how do you take all of these various elements that are coming at you from all of the devices that people are talking about in a connected planet, and be able to store that and make a material difference. And so I see that growing much faster than 40 to 50% CAGR, or 40 to 50% since 2017. And then you have the analytics, and what you find is there's a lot of pairing between this the technology component and the analytics component, because without the analytics data is just that. It's a lot of data sitting on servers that you're not able to do a whole lot with. And so you see a lot of growth in the analytics, especially in the software space and the services, which working with companies to identify what is it what data is it that they have and how can they apply that to their businesses in order to drive better outcomes. And in the big data space, kind of an interesting side note, was working with one of these traditional data, was working with a traditional data company who works largely in credit. And so they're looking at big data and they're trying to think about how do I get material into big data going forward. They said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to go out to Silicon Valley, we're going to go meet with Facebook, we're going to go meet with Google, and we're going to go meet with all these people, and we're going to talk about big data, and I'm going to get some ideas from all these meetings. And what he found was when he went out there and met with them, they were asking him more questions than he got to ask them. So all of this to say that I don't think anybody really has the big data marketplace knocked. And I think that emerging solutions are happening. I think advertising is probably the biggest and most aggressive area of investment right now for big data, and there's a lot of testing going on there, especially in the consumer-driven models, and that is probably kind of the incubator piece that will drive a lot of this. But companies really need to take a step back and look at what are the problems that they're trying to solve, not let's capture a bunch of data and then try and analyze it and find a needle in a haystack. Right? And so all of these, as you guys are sitting out in the audience, where do you want to spend your time? Where do you want to spend your focus on big data, and where is it most likely to kind of look more material in the near future? And we would contend that banking, communications, media, education, and government, largely because of the nature of that data, would be primary areas of focus, both from a software and a little bit of a hardware and services standpoint. The rest of, if you're looking to make kind of short-term investments, medium-term investments going forward, those would be kind of the areas that are kind of driving the primary focus on big data and solutions in big data, especially from an enterprise space. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of enterprise and consumer and the juxtaposition between those two. The rest of them are emerging and will take a little bit longer in our perspective, but they will be there. But I will caution kind of from big data and a big data standpoint, as I said, focus on the solution and the value the problem you're trying to solve, and then get the data, whether it be old data, small data, which is not really all that small, and big data, and focus that solution, or put together that solution around that value and the impact it could drive. That's big data. Second topic was alternative monetization. And so I thought what we would do is unpack the advertising marketplace. It's a good place to start around alternative monetization, as it's the most near and clear example of this. So advertising market, apart from the dip in the recession, right, is continuing to grow. Obviously, it should come of no surprise to anybody that radio, print are down. Broadcast TV is actually quite stable, right? And it hasn't really pivoted down yet, so that tells me that there are some fundamental economics that lead people to still continue to invest and get returns on broadcast TV. But what you see the majority of the growth happening is in two, is in cable, and largely because of cable interactive services, and digital. And so those are the two areas that are going to be driving, largely because of their interactive nature, the fact that you're able to present different things and target individuals and get different patterns and response rates based upon some of the data that we talked about collecting before. But the problem is that in the digital space, at least, when we look at the growth rates there, 70% of the revenue are held by the top 5 companies, right? And a lot of it's held by one company. So when you look at, and a lot of people talk about, hey, we should go drive digital advertising dollars, right? We should go build a business in digital advertising. You see a lot of ad networks, ad exchanges popping up, right? But it's really hard to build a $1 billion business in digital advertising, like super hard. Right, so what that says is that as you kind of look at what it is you're doing in the advertising standpoint, I would caution you to think about what is the deal that you're making with the customer. So when you look at what it is that you offer to the customer, right, you can offer content. This is like YouTube and the New York Times. They trade content. They wait for it, or they trade content for advertising, right? You look at search and navigation. You have Google and Yahoo, right? They're changing search, which you don't pay for your customer information, your data, and the advertising that you do. Products, the Kindle tried an ad-supported model and still has an ad-supported model for what they have. Google Fiber is rolling out in Austin and a couple other places, and they're trading broadband services. And communities. So you've got Facebook and Twitter, and these are the engagements and communities and the interaction that they're providing, and they're trading that interaction point for digital data, digital services. But the really, the material areas that people have generated a lot of value in are the search and navigation and the communities. What we haven't seen a lot of is kind of from a content or a product standpoint, anybody drives significant material value, especially on very high-end premium products, right? So if you take a broadband service and you think about, I'm going to offer somebody free broadband somewhere for data and big data-like elements to provide them a solution. You consider what you guys pay, like $50 or $60 a month for your broadband service. That's a heck of a lot of value that has to be created in the digital advertising economy and that's actually more than Facebook or more than Google and anybody else generates per user as they're starting to get those interactions. So you have to kind of break them off. So you got to think, as you're doing this, around what's the value you're providing to, as the company, like you guys sitting back there thinking, how do I do this? Like you have to think about what is the value that I'm providing to the customer, right? What's that product or service, and what are they going to derive from it? That's the value of the goods, the variability by how you deliver it, as well as the customer segments that you're looking to try and target. The marginal cost to you to deliver that thing. So if you have to go deliver broadband services, there's a high level of cost for you going out and making a truck roll and being able to provide those. Versus another advertisement for Google is not a high level of marginal cost. And then the mechanism to deliver. As you start to look at Facebook and others as they've done ads, how many of you guys have your Facebook on your mobile phone? Right? And there's like an ad every 4 parts of your newsfeed. Right? If it's on every 2, I bet you think about switching to Google+. So there's a certain amount of noise that people can deal with in this whole mechanism for delivering of advertisements that degrades the product and the overall experience that you have that needs to be thought of as you're kind of thinking about how you deliver this and can you support an ad delivered model. And so 3, just to highlight quickly, are, 1, Facebook. Clearly, a lot of you raise your hands around Wiki, so you drive a lot of value from the Facebook delivery model. Marginal cost is not that much to be able to deliver that to you, and the mechanism, I think they're starting to deal and tweak, but that service is completely free. Right? So you look at the Amazon Kindle, they tried an ad-supported model, which was a difference of, I think, $15 to $20 on that device, right? Now, I think Obama may be the only one who's able to get the number of Kindles sold, because Amazon, protects that quite highly, but not many indications of a high penetration rate of the ad-supported Kindles, right? And so clearly for the $15 or $20, you as consumers choose not to consume advertisements and be bothered by advertisements and pay that value, right? So not sure if that model quite works. And then one that's emerging is Google. So in Austin, Google has Google Fiber. So basically you pay an install fee, you pay a certain agreed upon population pays an install fee. You pay for a monthly television service. You can have ad-supported broadband. And that model is TBD on whether you're able to generate the type of volume and value that you would require in order to compensate for the value that would be decremented based upon what it traditionally costs to deliver those products and services. And so, and been my contention for years is as you start to look at the value of data, and this is where I think that in the first page, when we talked about what the value of data is and what it's going to grow at, I think that's true unless somebody fundamentally finds a way to change the game. And really, what I think changing the game looks like is the intersection between behavioral information around the individual, right? And what that means is you're not only talking about the household or the geography, you're going beyond the purchase categories and the transaction categories, but you know at a SKU level what you purchased, cash, non-cash transactions, product usage, multivariables, or everything about you. But it has to be done in a very protected way. And it also has to be done in an ecosystem that supports that. Because right now, if you go to a P&G and say, hey, I can offer you Greg wants Campbell's soup. Very hard to deliver that message effectively to me, easier to do it in an audience-based manner. So until we start to see all of those applications and services on the very far end, start to tailor and be able to present these ads and offers in a much more economical way, both for the user to get the value and the distributor to actually be able to do that and place that ad at a specific point in time based on this information, you'll start to, I question whether you're going to see the television model really break in a material fashion, in the next 3 to 5 years. So there you go, big data and alternative model.